Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Sonya Kearns, who played Chrissy Mainwaring. Sonya, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all, not at all. But what we'll do, Sonya, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode. And if you can tell us how you first got into acting.
So I wanted to act, I think, from the time I could walk and talk, according to my parents. I was fascinated by the television. I remember watching Play School, so that's showing how young I would have actually been. And I thought they could see me in my living room. I was just fascinated by the whole concept of TV. And I used to say, I want to be in there. I want to be on there. And my parents would say, stand behind. And I'd stand behind and they'd say, yeah, we can see you. And I'd be leaning around saying, I can't see me. And they said, no, you have to be right behind where we can see you, which, you know, I think is quite borders on child abuse today. But so on the illusion went, and my mum said I used to go through the yellow pages looking for drama schools and acting schools, and I used to phone them up. I mean, I would have been about 7, I think. And my mum would say, well, it's all this stuff coming through the post, you know, the acting schools. And eventually, I think to shut me up, she took me along and put my name down on a waiting list at Anna Scher's.
All right, yeah.
In Islington. And I think at the time they probably had a two-year waiting list, and it rolled around and I got in, I reckon I think I would have been about 10. And within a few months, I was put on their casting books and started to go for auditions. And very quickly got the audition for Grange Hill.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, okay. So before Grange Hill, did you get any other work?
No. I think actually, no, I did do a theatre production beforehand. But Grange Hill was my first big thing. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so when you got the audition for Grange Hill, so was it like, did you have many sort of callbacks, anything like that?
Yes, I did have. There was a couple of recalls. I mean, the first one I remember was just huge. You know, we went along to Elstree Studios and there was just kids everywhere from Sylvia Young, Italia Conti, and they were all the stage schools. Obviously, Anna Scher's was an after-school thing. And I don't know, I didn't think much of it. I just did what I was asked, kind of thing. With not much expectation. I was a huge Grange Hill fan.
Right,
I think
okay.
We all were. I asked myself why a lot of the time about that, and people do ask me that. And I've always said, well, you've got to remember there was only 4 TV channels back then. And I think, in all honesty, it was because there was just 4 channels. You had Grange Hill, you had Biker Grove, everyone watched, and I was a huge fan. So it was big, and I was nervous and excited, and I remember meeting Ronald Smedley, who was the producer, lovely man. Albert Barber was the director, I think, went on to be a producer. Lee Jackson, and obviously the creator, whose name escapes me now.
Oh, I'm testing you now. Phil Redmond.
Phil Redmond, there you go. See, that's a test for my perimenopausal brain fog there. But yeah, thank you for that. And they were there definitely on the recall. And they spoke about, you know, I was going to be Freddie Mainwaring's little sister, and I didn't meet him for any of the read-throughs, I don't think.
Right.
And then I remember my parents taking us all to our local McDonald's, which was a big thing back then. It wasn't just, you know, you grab and go. It was a treat. And we were all sat in this McDonald's restaurant, and my parents told me that I'd got the part in Grange Hill, and I still remember to this day, like, oh my God, this is,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. And so when you started, just before your first series started, there was a behind the scenes program was put out on the BBC as well. Now, they sort of focused, like you, although you were there, they sort of focused on like Sean Maguire and Rachel Roberts and sort of showed their auditions and stuff. But there was little bits with you where like Ron Smedley was talking to all like the six of you that I
Wow.
started.
I vaguely remember that. That rings a
Yeah.
bell now. Yeah.
But like as you said you were a fan. So what was it like going from being a fan and seeing these people on the telly to then like being in a room with like Ziggy and Cleaver
Yeah.
and all them? Like,
I mean, I was absolutely starstruck when I got on that coach the first like time, and they just jumped on Joanne Kenny, John Alford, who I had a huge crush on. I think my mouth may have been a little bit open, like gaping and in awe of these people. And but very quickly, and sadly for me, I think the illusion, like when I got onto a set and a studio, and I was like, there's no roof on the classroom. Like,
yeah.
and Harriet the donkey wasn't real. Like, well, she was obviously a real donkey, but the caretaker who I adored, and I was like, oh no, now I don't want to watch it anymore. And the illusion,
Yeah.
that was gone for me. But then I became part of something. So yeah.
Okay, so you joined in Series 11, went out in 1988. Obviously, we've said that you were Chrissy Mainwaring and you were in the first year. And you've already mentioned Freddie Mainwaring, but Chrissy had an older sister as well called Paula. Now, Paula was only in 3 episodes and then was never seen or heard of ever again.
Which is just bizarre, isn't it? And I don't actually remember it. So
right. The first time we saw Chrissy is she's walking into school with Freddie and Paula, and Freddie's telling her not to do anything stupid because it would reflect badly on the whole family. Obviously, because Freddie had that image, didn't he? And obviously didn't want anything spoiling his image. And obviously, Chrissy was friends with Justine Dean and Susie Young.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where Chrissy was talking to Susie about having an ambition. Can you remember what Chrissy's ambition was?
Okay, so I'm going to say it's something to do with art.
Not at that stage, no.
Right. Did she want to be famous?
She did.
Right. So this is very funny because now I remember my mum used to go berserk. I used to practice my autograph on the light switches in my bedroom.
Right.
And so when the script came through, my mum was like, this part was written for you. Would you realise this? So you just reminded me there, yes, Chrissy wanted to be famous.
She wanted to be a DJ. She wants to be a DJ and have her own show on like Capital or Radio 1. But she'd have to change her name, she said, because Chrissy Mainwaring was too long for signing autographs. And it was all right for Janice Long because she had a dead short name.
That's so funny.
We've mentioned the fact that you were there with like, John Alford and George and people like that. But there's a bit where one of your first scenes with someone from that group was getting a guided tour of the school from Gunch, who was like taking them round. And when he asked for, because he was always after money, when he asked for the contributions, Chrissy just walked away without giving him any money. And I don't know if we've mentioned Susie, we've mentioned Justine, but there was also some of the lads in that year group. So there was Matthew and there was Clark Trent. And Chrissy had given Clark Trent a nickname.
No idea.
No, so she called him Crypto because of Clark Trent, Superman, Crypto, all that. But she also said that he didn't really live up to his nickname either. And in your first couple of years, there was a couple of times where you had to dress up because there was one where they were in a history lesson and the teacher had dressed them up in different period costumes. And Chrissy was one of them, and she wasn't too happy about it because she was dressed in a Victorian costume. Although Susie quite liked her costume, she said. Now I've just said there, I've just said there that Chrissy wasn't too happy about it. Now it's fair to say that Chrissy was sort of a very serious character. Was it difficult to play someone who was sort of that intense and that serious all the time?
No, I knew that they wanted somebody that was quite ballsy. You know, she spoke her mind. She was quite assertive. I think because she had an older brother, and that, you know, I knew what they were asking for from the audition process.
Right.
So it didn't really. I quite enjoyed it.
It's okay. Brilliant. And you know, there's another bit there where they're in a science class and there's maggots. Don't know if you remember anything about the maggots. So Chrissy and Susie took some of them from the lesson.
Right.
And they put them in Morla McCall's dinner.
Yes.
Because he tried to make them move out of their seats at lunchtime. And Morla didn't know who it was and got into loads of trouble for throwing the plate and all that. And Chrissy and Susie are giving themselves little like smiles to each other, like, because they got away with that one. Now, there was a weird thing, like, you know, you mentioned the fact that Chrissy was into art, but there was a thing where Chrissy and Susie started making badges.
Oh, I remember this.
With fruit.
Yeah, honestly, I can still picture the badges.
Now, when I was watching that, I'm not really sure why they were doing it.
Wasn't it to make money? Wasn't it like
that's what they did eventually, but it was at first they were just wearing these badges with actual real fruit.
They weren't actual real fruit, but they looked like real fruit. I was quite fond of them. I can still see the pink one with the strawberry in the middle. I was quite fond of that. I was rocking that round school.
But yeah, they did start selling them. And then there was a bit of a commotion over the badges because people were arguing. And then Mr. Bronson turned up and asked what was going on. And Chrissy said they were just having a discussion about whether the olive was a fruit or not. And he told them to go to the library to find out. Now, I have to ask you there about Michael Sheard, who played Mr. Bronson, because everyone just says he was just so different to Mr. Bronson. He was just a dead nice fella, like, was it?
Yes, he was lovely. But, you know, to do a scene with him, he was so formidable. You know, he'd come right up to your face, and you know, obviously, you could still feel that. Oh, I'm in trouble. You know, so that sort of fear factor around him was palpable, and I think everybody that's been through the school process in their life sort of will know that one teacher or the head teacher that everybody feared. But he was just lovely. But it was a privilege to be on set with him.
I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this before. I mentioned it a few times. That behind the scenes program that I was talking about earlier. There's a bit where he's in makeup. He's in the dressing room, and he hasn't got his wig on.
Yeah.
And he sits there and he puts the wig on, and you see him change from being Michael Sheard to Mr. Bronson. It's brilliant. Like, but and shows how good he was. And I always say that it was a mark of how good Grange Hill was, the fact that people like Michael Sheard were in it as well. Like, you know, these big Hollywood actors. Now, there's a bit where Susie wasn't wanting to get changed for PE and she fainted. And Chrissy was first to her to help her. But later on, Chrissy and Susie had a chat about what had happened. And Susie said that she hadn't really fainted, but she just didn't want to get changed in front of everyone. And then that sort of led to a chat then about growing up.
On the swings.
And how Susie's mum didn't want to seem to admit that Susie was going to grow up and was going to change. But Chrissy was like, well, you know, she's not going to be able to ignore it. And again, like, I always say things about this in a kids' TV program, to see two girls having a conversation about that and the fact that what they are going through you know, groundbreaking's the word we gets used all the time about Grange Hill, but it was, you know, for kids TV to be showing stuff like that. And Chrissy also couldn't believe that Susie's mum hadn't spoken to her about it.
Yeah.
As well. And Justine was developing a friendship with Tegs. And Justine had told Chrissy that Tegs couldn't read and that she wanted to help him. So it gets a little bit convoluted, this story, because Justine wanted Chrissy to ask Freddie, to ask Laura, to ask Mrs. Regan if the school could give Tegs more help, rather than the girls just going to Mrs. Regan and saying, look, can you help him out? Let's go along the chain, you know, 6 degrees of separation and all that. Like.
Yeah.
But when Chrissy and Susie were talking about it, they called Tegs Burglar Bill, because obviously that was the backstory of him, wasn't it? You know, the fact that he'd been in trouble loads of times. And obviously Justine wasn't happy about that because she said that Tegs had changed. But the girls didn't see that. I mean, you don't, do you, when you're a kid? It's just like someone does something once. They get that reputation, they get that nickname, and it stays with them. Now, there was a day there called, it was the end of term, and it was Wear What You Like Day. And Chrissy was painting faces.
Right.
But would you have actually been painting those faces?
No. The irony of that is I couldn't even draw a matchstick man.
Right, okay.
I was not allowed to play Pictionary at Christmas because nobody could guess what I'd drawn. So, yeah, it was all the crew, the art department, anybody, you know, I remember apparently Chrissy had done this mural, and it was up in a swimming pool not far from where I lived, actually, in Potter's Bar, which is where we'd filmed it. And people just used to laugh and say, you can't draw, Sonya, you're useless at art. And I was like, well, this is it, you know, therein lies the magic of TV.
Yeah.
All these things that Chrissy creates.
Brilliant. Okay, then so we move on then to your second series 12, and there was a bit where Chrissy was like mugged or attacked on the way to school. So there was self-defense classes were offered, so that was sort of running throughout the series. But there was also, which was I think the first, we've mentioned the fruit, but this was like this is the first storyline I remember from watching it the first time about Chrissy. And it's when Chrissy and Susie had the scheme about ordering clothes from the catalogue.
Yeah.
So they'd order the clothes from the catalogue, they'd keep them for a few days and then send them back.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where the kids set up a catwalk in the classroom. They got all the tables down the middle. And Chrissy's walking up and down the catwalk while the class was singing. Now, can you remember what song they were singing?
I can't.
So they were actually singing The Stripper.
Oh, gosh.
Now, obviously, this is an audio podcast, but Sonya has just covered her face there. She's not looking too good at the moment, I'll be honest.
It's just really inappropriate, isn't it?
But it's but it's kids as well. But that, you know, Grange Hill getting away with stuff as well.
Well, yeah.
And then the clothes arrived, and for some reason they took them into school. That's going to end well, isn't it? These clothes that they're not keeping and paying for, like, because Susie's then panicking that the clothes are going to get wrecked and saying they shouldn't try them on. But Chrissy was adamant that they should wear them at least once.
Yes.
They were trying the clothes on in the school at the same time that
I remember this.
Trevor was chasing Ziggy around the school. Now, can you remember what Trevor had hold of?
Wasn't it ketchup?
It was, yeah.
I remember that. I do remember that.
And obviously, the girls inevitably got caught in the crossfire. Because obviously, the girls are like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And there was a girl there called Carol who said her mum worked in a dry cleaners and could get the clothes cleaned and sorted for them. And she did clean them, but the colours were faded and they weren't like what they weren't what they were anymore. So they couldn't send them back. And in the end, Susie had to tell her mum what had happened. But her mum had already known, because obviously the mum had all, like, you know, the letters coming through and
From the
everything. So
catalogue.
yeah. And it was Susie's mum actually blamed Chrissy for it as well. Like, but Susie made sure like that she knew it wasn't Chrissy's fault. Like, you know, bit of a solidarity there between the
Yeah.
girls, like looking after it. And you just mentioned the swimming pool mosaic, which was around this time, and it was decided it'd be a joint design of Chrissy's mosaic and Danny Kendall's, because Danny had passed away. But there's a bit where the painters weren't using the right colours. So Chrissy went to Miss Booth, because she went to the painters and said that, you know, you're not using the right colours, and the painters were like quite dismissive of it because she was just a kid. So she went to Miss Booth, good old Miss Booth, who told the painters that it had to be right. Because like, the thing with Chrissy and Miss Booth got sort of like quite close, didn't they? Like, you know, over the years with the storylines we'll come on to later on. But obviously, you must have had a good relationship with Karen Ford, who played Miss Booth.
Yes, I did.
Like, yeah, I mean, and what was the relationship like in general between the kids and the adults?
Really good. I mean, I think obviously I'm an adult now, I'm a mum, and I look at it and I think, you know, you're working with children, you've got to find some common ground to try and get the best out of them, whatever that capacity is, you know, in any workplace, I'm guessing. So looking at it now, they just had to sort of bring themselves down to our level. I mean, as we got older, I think it got easier, and then you could really, I mean, the guy that played my dad, we had so much fun. So much fun. And you know, the woman that played my mum, but she was lovely as well. And you know, I was very close to Anna Quayle. I considered Anna Quayle as actually one of my closest friends.
Right, yeah.
We would socialize together outside of work. And you know, we had a special relationship. So that, you know, it didn't matter the adult child kind of divide. But like I say, things were easier, I think, when we were, you know, young people as opposed to children.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And you know, we're still talking about the mosaic. Chrissy was interviewed by a reporter from the radio about the mosaic. Now, we didn't see the interview, but Chrissy said that she thought she'd made a fool of herself and that she wished she hadn't done it. Do you remember if an interview was ever sort of filmed or anything like that?
Not that I can remember, no.
Like I say, I don't think we actually see it, but Kissy's there talking about it. Like, okay. Because Gonch then started selling tapes of the radio broadcast. You know, anything to make a quick bit of money. Like,
it's interesting because Gonch was always very entrepreneurial, wasn't he? So I think when you talk about what Susie and Chrissy were doing, I think they were muscling in on his empire, generation, weren't they, really?
Yeah, because Chrissy says to him, well, you know, I've taped it myself, but also I'm on that tape, so I should be getting some of the profits from that. You know, she was after royalties. Like, the older girls, like Callie and Ronnie and that, were still there at this time as well, and they were like asking for a donation for Mr. Bronson's leaving present and to buy a raffle ticket to help raise money for their prom.
Right.
And, you know, Chrissy being Chrissy was refusing because she wasn't allowed. She wasn't allowed to the prom. But also, she said, I'm not buying him a present. I ate his guts. but the 50 years did hold, you know, their prom went ahead. And even though they were told they couldn't go, Chrissy and Susie gate crashed the prom as well. And they were found by Mrs. McCluskey and Callie, who let them stay. And I mean, I always say when it was something like that and you got to dress up and it was a bit of a party, that must have been great to not be like just a classroom set and just school uniform, just doing something different.
Yes,
like
it was always fun, yeah.
Now, we move on to Series 13 and Lynn Radford, who played Susie, had left at this time and Natalie Stevens had joined.
Yes.
But how did you feel about Lynn Radford leaving?
It's interesting because I don't really remember when she left, but
Right.
Lynn and I knew each other from Manishes,
Right.
along with John Drummond, who played Trevor Cleaver,
Yeah.
and obviously John Holmes, who played Gonch.
Yeah.
So I knew them, and I think because I would still see them, because I would still go to Anna's groups on a Friday, it was called the Young Professionals,
Mm.
and I would still see Lynn there. So I guess I don't really remember her leaving Grange Hill and then not seeing her.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah,
All right. But then when Natalie came in, it just seemed like a straight swap. Like Natalie came in and like Susie wasn't there because there was no sort of like big introduction for Natalie. It wasn't like, oh, this is a new girl. It was like
yeah,
she'd always been there. And then, one of the first things there is an art lesson, which we've already talked about, your art prowess there. Like, but Chrissy, Justine, and Natalie asked they asked Miss Booth if they could do a t-shirt design about saving the earth rather than the posters that they've been asked to do. And this then led them to starting a t-shirt business.
again, I mean, they were just budding entrepreneurs, weren't they?
Yeah. And I've written down in my notes here, and you've already mentioned it, because Gonch had left Grange Hill, it seemed like they needed someone with a money-making scheme. And this year it was the girls' t-shirt business. So yeah, Chrissy and Natalie tried to sneak into the art room to print a t-shirt, but they were caught by Miss Booth. So it was Justine that said, well, we just need another room so she could get hold of some fabric paints. And in the meantime, while all this was going on, Miss Booth had an argument with Mr. Hargreaves, who played by Kevin O'Shea, who was the new deputy head after Mr. Bronson had
Yes.
left. She drew a caricature of him because she was angry with him, but she put it in the bin. But Chrissy went and took it out. And you think, what's she done that for? And you don't hear about, like nothing happened with it for ages. But we'll come on to that in a bit. They found a room in the basement of the school to print their t-shirts. And there was a lad called Raju who came and he found all this stuff and said he wanted to be their business partner, like their manager, because he could get them t-shirts from his cousin. And it gets far more sort of into the actual business side of it. Whereas Gonch was like, right, what can I do? And it was like a really quick thing. He talked about, I'll give you 28 days to pay for the t-shirts and all this. So they agreed to it. And they had stencils, but no paint. So they saw someone spray painting their car. And Chrissy actually nicked the can of the spray paint from the bloke who was spray painting his car, saying she found the answer to their problem. So they bought a load of spray paint. And Chrissy and Justine went down to the basement to paint the t-shirts using the spray paint. But while they're there, they were commenting on how difficult they were finding it to breathe because of the fumes.
I had forgotten this, but I'm remembering it now.
So
Yeah.
while they were in there, two of the lads, the Timpsons, had locked them in the room. And when Natalie and Raju realised that the girls were in there, they got the door open, and Chrissy and Justine were unconscious.
Yes.
So obviously, every time they thought they had something sorted, another problem came up. Obviously, nearly dying was a bit of a problem for them in that one. So they realised that they'd need to use something else. So they tried using dye, but the colours ran. So they struggled to sell. They were struggling to sell the t-shirts basically, and it looked like they'd have to close their business before it even started. But they found some pens and realised that the pens would work. So they started selling t-shirts, and they started chasing people for money, including Matthew. Now, the thing with Matthew at the start, when he'd been in at the start, had come from this really well-off background. He were really well off. He had big car, big house, and all that.
Yes.
But his story was, mum and dad had split up, mum couldn't work, and they were living in sort of like really low demand accommodation.
Mm.
And he couldn't afford the t-shirt because he had no money, but obviously he wasn't telling anyone this. And the girls were like quite harsh with him. And, the girls then, they started doing well with the t-shirts and were selling them. But then they sold the t-shirts to Mike Bentley. which had the caricature of Mr. Hargreaves on that Miss Booth had thrown. And Mike wore the T-shirt. It was then confiscated from him by Mr. Robson. And Mr. Hargreaves saw it. And it all came out then about where it had come from and all that. So the T-shirt business was officially closed down after that one. Like the money-making schemes in Grange Hill, no matter who it was, they never seemed to work. They worked for a little bit, but then there was too many problems in the end. Now, in that year, Chrissy had heard Justine and her boyfriend, Andy, talking about what had happened the night before. They'd been babysitting. And when Chrissy asked Justine about it, they were in the library and Mr. Hankin told them that they weren't allowed in there. And Chrissy said, "We're going, keep your glasses on," to Mr. Hankin. I only mention that because we saw a rare smile from Chrissy. As I said, she was very serious. She was like that. But I that's literally the only reason I mentioned that, because you don't see a smile very often, but we did in that
She
scene.
was very, very serious.
Yeah, because she said, "Keep your glasses on," and they ran off, and she was laughing her head off. And going back to what had happened, Chrissy asked Justine what had happened with Andy, and Justine told her that Andy had asked her to sleep with him, and she'd said no. But then Chrissy then says, "Oh, it might not be easy for you to keep hold of him if you keep saying no." So Justine then called her a bitch and walked off. And in the meantime, Andy had told his mates that he had slept with Justine, and the story was going round. And even though Justine had told Chrissy she hadn't, Chrissy still believed that they had.
Right.
And so Chrissy started making comments about Justine sleeping with Andy, which is a little bit rich when you consider what happened later on with Chrissy.
Yes.
We move on then to series 14. Now, this is where your biggest storyline sort of kicked in. And you were in every episode in this series as well, 1991, series 14. And Chrissy had started seeing Ted. Now, before we get on to like sort of where the storyline went, how did you feel when you find out that Chrissy was going to have a boyfriend?
So I remember Ron Smedley, Albert Barber, pulling me into the office to tell me that they wanted to do this storyline, that they'd wanted to do it for quite some time. I think as far back as Simone Himes, Callie. Right. I think they tried to make it happen then, but so controversial.
Yeah.
Was a teenage pregnancy at that time that it was probably going to be the biggest thing since they'd done Zamo and the drugs. So it had taken that long in the making, which I think is bizarre now when you think about it, but that it was so huge. And they told me that, she was going to have a boyfriend. I remember sitting there thinking, please let it be. Please let it be Mike Bentley, Renee, or John Alford, or somebody, really hot. When they told me it was going to be Ian, I think I burst out laughing. I said, and I think Albert said to me, "That's exactly it, Sonya. She finds him very funny, and she's attracted to his sense of humour." I just think they wanted it to be different, not, girl falls for the coolest guy in school. That would have been too predictable, which, I liked, really.
Yeah.
Although I was, crestfallen that it wasn't going to be. But, it was, I remember them telling me about it.
Yeah, brilliant. And Chrissy didn't want Ted to tell his mates at first that they were seeing each other because, lads being lads would have tried to spoil things, basically, is what she was saying. So Ted had handed a T-shirt to Chrissy in school, and Natalie had asked her why Ted had given Chrissy a T-shirt, and Chrissy had just said that she lent the T-shirt to Ted's sister, and Natalie asked her when, and Chrissy was like, last week, and then told her that she didn't have to tell her everything. Clearly, Chrissy didn't want to tell her mates about Ted either. And Ted then brought Chrissy some pizza into school for her lunch. And Chrissy kissed him on the cheek, which was the first time we'd seen any sort of like affection between the two of them, other than like when they were out together, walking and holding hands and things like that. Now, there's a bit where I think this is quite poignant in this fact that this is where we first see that year group growing up, because Chrissy, Natalie, and Justine were going to a party, and Justine had invited Tegs, and they knew they'd be able to get into this party, but Tegs wouldn't. Now, I say poignant about growing up because I was Tegs in that situation growing up. Like all my mates all looked older, and I looked like I was tiny. I looked dead young. I wish I still looked as young as I did then, to be honest. Like, but
yeah, don't we all?
Yeah, I lost all my hair and everything. Like, but yeah, so at this party, a lads asked Chrissy to dance, and she'd said no. But when Ted turned up, she did go and dance with this lad, and then they did have a chat, Ted and Chrissy, and Chrissy thought that because he was older, he wouldn't want to be seen with her at the party. But he said he didn't care if his mate saw him, and that's when they did decide to sort of go out properly and not keep it a secret. But just as an aside, that episode was the last time we saw Tegs. It was the last time we saw Sean Maguire. Did you have any idea that Sean Maguire was going to go on to do all the things that he's done since?
So I knew Sean before, but not in any sort of acting capacity.
Right.
I'm Irish. His parents are Irish. They taught me Irish dancing way before Grange Hill.
Wow.
And gosh, they taught my nephew, nieces. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I already knew Sean in that sense. And when I used to get picked up during rehearsals, I used to go to school in the morning. A lot of us did. So we'd be tutored offset when we were recording. But when we were rehearsing, we all went to school in the morning and then to the studios in the afternoon.
Right.
So I would be at school and a taxi would arrive with Sean in the back. It had picked him up first and then it had come and picked me up. Right. So Sean and I were very, very close because, we'd spend a lot of time together during, traveling to and from rehearsals. It didn't make me very popular in school. I was at a convent school, so you can imagine this car with this heartthrob was in the back of it, and there's me climbing into the back, oh, he's my friend, and the girls probably wanted to gouge my eyes out because that's teenage girls are like. So we were close. So I remember when Sean was leaving, I remember being really sad about it, but obviously wishing him well and, happy for him with everything that he was doing. But yeah, I do remember when he was leaving, it was a bit of a blow,
Yeah.
It was sad. Everyone was sad that he was going.
Yeah. But did you ever think that he would go on to do, all these other things with, like, EastEnders, but then being in films and all the singing and all that?
You can never, it's such a fickle industry. You can never, predict these things. But, Sean was talented and, he did great. And, you obviously just happy for him and, wish him well.
Brilliant. Okay. Now, there was then a class discussion on sex with Mrs. Munro. You've already mentioned Anna Quayle, and I just think she was brilliant. Like, Mrs. Munro is one of my favourite characters. Like, but while the discussion's going on, Mrs. Munro asked them what words they would need to use when talking about sex, and again, that just for a kids program to be showing that as well, like, the fact that that's happening. But Natalie said love, and that's when we see a little wry smile on Chrissy's face there. Again, we saw another smile there from Chrissy. But yeah, just about love and about sex. And like I say, it's just amazing for a kids program to be tackling that story. Now, there was also Mr. Van der Groot. You remember Mr. Van der Groot, the Dutch teacher? And Natalie and Chrissy basically bullied him into taking a flat that Natalie's mum had sorted out for him to stay in. And Chrissy said that Natalie and her would go and help Mr. Van der Groot decorate his flat because Natalie obviously fancied Mr. Van der Groot, and she thought Chrissy did as well. But they decided they'd go and decorate the flat, but not tell their parents, for obvious reasons. But the night they were going round to paint, Natalie couldn't go, so Chrissy went on her own. And then Ted turned up, and Chrissy left with him and left Mr. Van der Groot decorating it. And that's when we see the first proper snog of Ted and Chrissy. Now, I have to ask you, were those scenes difficult to film?
Yes. I mean, I'm thinking back even to the scene on the swings,
Yeah.
You've got to remember, at that time, we're so different now as a society. And, I remember being that young and gosh, I'd be sat with my dad and some tampon advert would come on and I'd think, oh God, I want to die right now. And it was the same because we were young kids and there was a whole crew of men and women stood around and you were like, I'm actually dying inside saying this, it was embarrassing even for us then.
Yeah.
So all of those things were quite, like you say, they were pushing the boundaries and for kids show, but we were just kids and it was hard because there was a lot of taboo around stuff and, I'm not saying that was right, but we were growing up in a very different world back then. So I remember being mortified on more than one occasion.
Brilliant. This is where the pregnancy storyline kicked in because at first you don't really realise what's happening. Chrissy's just sort of sat by a canal, obviously something on her mind, and then she goes into school and she was painting a copy of the Scream.
Yes, I remember it.
Yeah, and Natalie asked her how she got on painting Mr. Van der Groot's flat, and Chrissy made up some big romantic story about what had happened, and Natalie asked her if that really happened. And Chrissy said, no, it happened. It hadn't. And then she ruined the painting and stormed off. And that's when Chrissy then told Fran later on that she was pregnant. Now, what was the public reaction like around the storyline?
I think people thought it was real. I remember distinctly, again, Albert Barber and Ron, again, I think, asked my parents to meet them in a restaurant in Elstree one weekend just to prepare them that, the press are going to be interested. We need you to be aware that, I think the press were outside my actual school.
Wow.
Because the rumor was that I was actually pregnant and that they had to write it into the...
No way.
Yeah, so they wanted to see if I was actually pregnant at my own local comprehensive school.
Oh my God.
So and people used to send baby clothes. You'd get fan mail and people were sending in knitted baby clothes. So it was bizarre. But again, at that time, I think, even today, I think people look at TV shows and you have to say, this isn't real. Why? My dad used to be like that. I'd go, Dad, calm down. It's not real.
Yeah.
And I think, especially at that time, people did.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's. Was there any sort of negative reaction then from the public or anything like that?
Yes, because there was such a stereotype about that, wasn't there? I think people would assume that only a girl of a certain demeanor would end up in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Fran and Natalie were officially the only two kids that knew, but two of the younger girls had heard a conversation. So obviously that started spreading. But Chrissy went to Miss Booth's house. Now, even that to me was just bizarre, as someone who works in a school. If a kid ever turned up at my house, there's no way they're getting in. Chrissy.
Well, I mean, I have to say, when I went to help Mr. Vandergroot
Yeah.
paint his flat. I mean, it's got safeguarding written all over it, isn't it?
That's two teachers who houses Chrissy's gone
Yeah, she
to.
just casually pops round. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when Chrissy went to speak to Miss Booth about it, Chrissy had told her that it was it had happened on her first time, and she thought she couldn't get pregnant on the first time, and hopefully sex education's moved on in such a way now that all kids realize like that it will happen first time,
Yes.
or it can happen first
Yes.
time, like because at that time a lot of kids would have been thinking that. And Chrissy said that she hadn't yet told the father and wouldn't tell her mum who he was when she eventually told her. And like I say, the younger kids had overheard Chrissy talking to Fran about it, and then they started the rumor that the baby was actually Mr. Vandergroot's. When
Yes.
she'd been round there, and Justine asked Chrissy why she hadn't told the father about it, and she said she wasn't doing anything until it had been confirmed that she was officially pregnant.
Right.
But in the meantime, Trevor had told Ted the rumours about her being pregnant and that it was Mr. Vandergroot's. And obviously, Mr. Vandergroot was asked about it by Mrs. McCluskey. I thought it was quite clever the way it wasn't just Chrissy and Ted involved. It was like all these other little branches going off everywhere. And when Ted asked Chrissy if it was true, she just told him to leave him alone. Poor Ted. It's not. Poor Ted had all kinds going on in his head, like, and didn't know, like, and then he's getting treated like that by Chrissy as well. But then Chrissy later told Miss Booth that she wasn't pregnant, and that it been confirmed by the hospital. And Ted had apologized to Chrissy about what he'd said about Mr. Vandergroot, because when he'd said, is it true that you're having a baby with him and all that? But she told him that she wasn't pregnant, and she asked him if he was glad if it was a false alarm. And he'd said that he was glad that it was a false alarm. So maybe she was just testing the water just to see. But then there was the famous trip to Dartmoor, the Outward Bound. I don't know if you remember much.
So it's really interesting. So, I remember having the pregnancy storyline. I remember, a lot around myself and Ian, like Ted, but I didn't remember the Mr. Vandergroot spin on this at all until you said it. And I mean, I'm cringing because you're just like, oh, this is awful. Like a teacher was in the running for the father. I don't. I remember Dartmoor very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't remember that sort of controversy.
And at Dartmoor, did you actually get to do all them activities?
We did. So we went down. We all went down, I think, a week before, and had done the potholing, the abseiling, which was my favourite. And so we'd done it all before in preparation for doing it for the filming.
Brilliant. Okay. So so the trip to Dartmoor happened. Chrissy wasn't eating at this point. And then when they went climbing, Chrissy started panicking about falling. And Justine then realised that Chrissy had lied about not being pregnant, basically. So Justine and Richard, Desmond Askew, and Ray Kelly George took Chrissy back to the centre where they were staying. But Chrissy fell and hurt her ankle and couldn't walk back to the centre. So can you remember what Ray did to help them get back there?
No.
So Ray then nicked the van. he found a van on on one of the farms and nicked it. Back. Now I've actually heard, I've heard that one of the reasons Kelly George ended up doing that was because he was one of the few people that could actually drive.
Yes. Kelly was older. Yeah. I think Kelly was about 19 when he joined.
But then the final exercise for that was Chrissy was in a group with, and I couldn't get my head around how you ended up in this group. Mr. Robson, Mrs. Monroe, and a lad called Henry. So Henry joined when Ray joined, when Kelly joined, basically.
Right.
And they were like quite good mates at first, but then you didn't really see him sort of much after that.
Okay. Oh,
Now,
yes, I do remember him now. Yes, I
yeah,
do remember. Yeah.
yeah. Back at school, Chrissy fainted in an assembly. Chrissy was sitting down and sort of, I watched it a few times because the fall from the chair to the floor is quite magnificent, to be honest.
I think there was a mattress.
Right, okay.
If I recall rightly, there was a mattress. It's no
Right.
great acting skills on my behalf. I just threw myself onto a mattress.
And that was when it all came out. That she told Miss Booth that she lied about not being pregnant, and because she was scared to admit to herself that she was. And that's when Mrs. McCluskey called the mum in, Eliza Hunt, played your mum. And the younger kids had overheard again because they were in a crawl space in the ceiling, as everyone does in school. Everyone finds a little crawl space to get into.
Yes.
And the news then spread again. And Chrissy had told her mum she didn't want to tell her because she didn't want to hurt her, basically. But the mum was really accepting about it, but said that they shouldn't tell Chrissy's dad until they decided what they were going to do. And Ted had heard about Chrissy, and they went for a chat about it in the cafe. And Ted said that he would stand by Chrissy, and he would even marry her if they needed to. But I love this conversation because all this gets said while Ted's playing on a pinball machine, like this big life-changing situation, and he's there still on the pinball. Like, that's far more important to get that one done. And they had another conversation, and Ted had changed his mind. He was trying to deal with it backwards and forwards all over the place, and said that she shouldn't have the baby, basically. She should have an abortion, which was also what Chrissy's mum wanted Chrissy to do as well, because she was so young, Chrissy's mum was saying. And Ted went round to Chrissy's house for dinner, and then Chrissy's dad unexpectedly came up. Now, watching this from a viewer's point of view, obviously because of people have left the program and stuff, it was always weird that Freddie wasn't around or Paula wasn't around as well. And Chrissy's dad unexpectedly came home, so Chrissy and Ted went for a walk. While they were out, Chrissy's mum told Chrissy's dad about Chrissy being pregnant. So when Ted walked Chrissy home, Chrissy's dad ran out the house and punched Ted, floored him. And Chrissy then told Ted that she was going to have the baby. And Ted went berserk and almost punched Mr. Hargreaves, which was something a lot of people would have liked to have done, to be honest. But yeah, Ted later apologized to Chrissy. It was good, the fact that I thought it did show both sides of it. It was like what Chrissy was dealing with, what Ted was dealing with. But also trying to find out why they wanted this to happen, because Ted asked Chrissy why she wanted to have the baby. And Chrissy's opinions were, the baby's real now, got this baby, and she couldn't get rid of it. She said Ted and Chrissy needed to be more friendly with each other. And Chrissy had a chat with her mum about the baby's name. But can you remember what Chrissy said she wanted to call the baby if it was a girl?
No.
So she wanted to call the baby Rachel. But at that point, we didn't find out what she wanted to call it if it was a boy. But Ted and Trevor were having the same kind of chat about the baby. And Trevor said to Ted that he wouldn't be offended if Ted had wanted to call the baby Trevor. Trevor Fisk. And Ted went to Chrissy's for tea again, but didn't get punched this time. And like I said, it was always weird that Freddie and Paula were never. I assume Freddie was off living somewhere with his own business, and Paula would have been at university. There's a nice way to explain that situation there. And we then move on to series 15, and Chrissy's in 5th year, and by this time is visibly pregnant. What was it like having to wear the pregnancy?
Oh, honestly, it was horrible. It was horrible. I had to step into this sort of padded leotard, and I had 3 different sizes, obviously, for trimester. And I hated it. It was really horrible. Yeah.
I mean, Chrissy described herself as looking like a balloon in a blazer, is what it was the phrase that Chrissy said. And Chrissy told Justine she wants to go back to school because she just wants to carry on with their normal life. I mean, when I was at school, a couple of girls were pregnant around the same time, and they just left school. That was it.
Yeah.
Like it was just common practice. But from what I know now, if a girl does get pregnant at school, they will quite often carry on at school for as long as they possibly can. Walking to school that day, Justine met her boyfriend Liam, and Chrissy said she knew when to make herself scarce. Obviously, Liam was Danny Cunningham.
Oh yeah,
Danny's been on here. He's great, Danny. Yeah, he's a good lad, Danny. So Chrissy said she knew when to make herself scarce and that she'd be okay walking to school. But in the underpass, she did start getting grief and pushed around by other kids from Grange Hill until Liam appeared and shouted a load of abuse, and all the Grange Hill kids chased him off so that to make the path free for Chrissy to walk to school. And Mrs. Munro again talking to Chrissy and told her that there was such a thing as being too independent.
Mm-hmm.
And Justine also said she hoped the baby wouldn't inherit Chrissy's stubbornness. This bit was weird. It was like a throwaway comment, and it wasn't even picked up on. But when Chrissy walked into class, I don't know if you remember Nick, who was played by Gareth Phillips, the Welsh lad.
Yes, I do.
Because he was a big lad. And Chrissy walked in, and he laughs at it and goes, "She's even bigger than I am." And, but nothing got mentioned about it. It was just sort of said and passed. And I'm thinking, no way has he just done that. And Justine and Chrissy were in like the cloakroom talking when Natalie appeared, called Chrissy a slag, and ran off. And the girls were all mad about Natalie calling Chrissy a slag, and they were all looking for it. But it turned out this is where the twin sister came in, and it had actually been Natasha who called it. Because at first she didn't know that Natalie had a twin sister. And then eventually Chrissy did start doing her schoolwork at home. She stopped going in because she was getting a bit of hassle. So she was doing her work at home. Ted was there, and he told her that he'd be able to get a job in. Can you remember where he said he'd be able to get his job?
Was it delivering pizzas?
No. So that was an earlier one, but
right.
this is when he was actually going to get like a full-time job.
No, I don't remember.
So he was going to get a full-time job in Southampton.
Right.
But Chrissy didn't want to move there because that was the thing. It was like almost accepted that whatever happened, they were going to be living together as a family with the baby. And then Chrissy did go back to school, and they were talking about, they were just having a chat, but Justine was trying to do some work, and they started arguing. Chrissy walked off and onto the playground and got hit in the stomach by a football.
Yeah.
But thankfully all was okay. Justine went to see Chrissy at home. And basically Chrissy said that she was feeling left out and lonely being all day in the house. And it was starting to hit home what life was going to be like for her when she had the baby. Especially when Justine had said that she'd go and see her the next day, but she never. And then Chrissy's nan had a stroke, and the mum had to go and visit her, but she didn't want to leave Chrissy. Mm-hmm. Chrissy said that everything would be okay because she wasn't due for another 3 weeks. And Chrissy went into school to drop some work off. And while she was there, she went into labour in the toilets. And luckily, she had Justine and Mr. Hankin to help. Now, Lee Kearns, who played Mr. Hankin, he's been on here as well. And he is a massive supporter of this podcast as well. But he must have been great to work with.
Oh, he was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So funny. I mean, we'd sit and talk, when we were off set and stuff. And he'd worked with Rowan Atkinson, he'd done Blackadder, and, you would just be fascinated listening to his stories. But he was a very funny man.
Yeah.
I loved spending time with him.
Yeah. Everyone says the same, about him. But what I love about that scene is, whereas he should be trying to reassure her, he starts telling her, giving her a scientific explanation about what's happening to her body at that point. Until Justine then says to him, Sarah, it's probably better if you go wait outside, to be honest. Like, and Mr. Hankin and Justine went with Chrissy to the hospital, leaving Mr. Hankin having to explain to the nurses that he wasn't actually the father of the baby, like, as well. And while this is all going on, they're trying to get in touch with Ted. But Ted had gone to Southampton for the job interview and was actually with another girl at the time as well, like at a party that he was at. And Chrissy had a baby boy, but they didn't let her see him at first because he wasn't well straight away. He'd had fluid in his lungs, but he was okay. And Ted eventually went to see Chrissy and the baby, but it was a really awkward conversation, like, because obviously they hadn't seen each other for a while. They'd been trying to get in touch and they couldn't. And that was when Chrissy said what she wanted to call the baby. Can you remember the baby's name?
Was it Jay?
It was Jay. Yeah. But then we saw Chrissy then sort of like struggling to look after the baby and becoming like quite isolated and becoming like depressed almost. Ted went to Chrissy's house and Chrissy just seemed really annoyed with him, telling him off for the way he was talking to Jay and the way he was holding him as well. Now, when he's talking to him, he's just talking to him like any adult talks to a baby. But Chrissy didn't seem to like that. I think she just didn't really like Ted that much by this point, to be honest.
She's probably irritated. Her hormones were all over the place.
Yeah. But he apologised for not going round, but said he wants to make a go of it. And if he got the job, he wanted Chrissy and Jay to go with him. But she told the girls that she didn't know if she wanted to spend their life with Ted. And later on, Justine had been to see Chrissy, and Justine told her that there was going to be a big fight between Grange Hill and St. Joseph's.
Oh, gosh, I remember this.
Yeah. So Chrissy said she was fed up and missing out on everything, and that they were going to go to where the fight was. And they took the baby. I've spoken to a few people who've been on here about those scenes, and they said it was just bedlam. It was absolute chaos because there was just hundreds and hundreds. Some people said they were actually scared, genuinely scared because of the number of people there, but because of some of the lads who were around as well, it was quite terrifying as well. Were you scared at all at any point when you went there? Like?
No, I don't remember being scared. I remember just thinking, I've got this long speech to remember.
Yeah.
And I don't know, at that time, I was like, this is a bit ridiculous, as if she'd put her baby in harm's way, you know.
Yeah, because as it's all about to kick off, Chrissy does get the baby and gives a speech about how he'd grow up to be a big man like them. But then the police came and everyone ran off. Now, the end credits of that is just Chrissy, Justine, and the baby, like an overhead shot, and it fades. It like fades to blue, and it's just them two while the credits are going on. I don't even know if there was any sort of. I can't remember if there's any sort of music going on. And now Ted did have a job in a restaurant or a cafe, or he was cleaning dishes anyway. But he packed that job in and told Chrissy he'd been offered the better job in Southampton. And she didn't want to go and told him that he shouldn't go either. And Chrissy asked Justine to ask Ted again not to go to Southampton. And she went to Ted's house. But when she was there, the postman gave her a postcard thinking she lived there. And it was from the girl who Ted had met in Southampton. And she wanted Liam, her boyfriend, and his mates to go and give Ted a kicking because of what he'd done. And Justine left Chrissy's just as Ted had turned up. And Chrissy then told Ted that she knew about the girl in Southampton. And she basically said, look, we don't love each other. Like, what's the point of staying together? And Ted decided to move to Southampton. Chrissy also took Jay to school to talk to the younger kids about being a mother, but was interrupted by Mrs. Keel, who wasn't happy about Chrissy being there. And while Chrissy was in the school, she found out that there was going to be a fashion show at the school, and she ended up helping to set it up. And she got talking to someone who was a friend of Mr. Bisley, the art teacher at the time. And she'd had a baby when she was young and had gone to college after she'd had the baby. And it gave Chrissy something to think about. Maybe I can do something.
Yes.
And at the fashion show, Chrissy spoke to Mrs. Monroe about coming back to school to get some qualifications because a friend had offered to look after Jay for Chrissy. But when Chrissy spoke to her mum about it, it just didn't seem possible, as her friend could only look after Jay for half the week. So Chrissy then told Mrs. Monroe that she wouldn't be able to go back to school after all. And we never saw Chrissy again.
No.
So was that always the plan for you to leave then?
Yes. I left when I left. They did ask me to come back, but I said no.
Right.
Because I'd, very much, I think there was for your acting, Grange Hill, whilst it was a great basis and experience and set you up, for television. You wanted it, if you wanted to go on and do other things, and I did, so I felt like it would be a backward step going back. But I remember that when they contacted me, they were a bit like, well, what do you mean you won't come back? And I said, well, I'm not coming back. And they said, but we've already written the episodes. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not coming. And I believe somebody else played Chrissy.
Right. So what I was going to ask you, like, whenever I put an episode of the podcast out, I put picture clues online on social media for people to guess it. And the first person that gets it gets to ask a question. So I've got a question here. Someone called Richard. Now, Richard runs a Twitter account called No Context Grange Hill, right? Where he just puts a picture up with no context, leaves it, and that's it. So the question is, he said it was a couple of years later where Justine met a girl. The girl was called Jackie, and Jackie had a baby called Sam. So he was asking, was that supposed to be you in that episode where Jackie turned up with her baby and some girls did some babysitting for it, and Justine and Jackie. So they did actually contact you for that. So that was it. So she didn't actually play Chrissy. She played like a character in it.
They must have rewritten it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that was meant to be you.
Yes.
Okay. So how did you feel about leaving?
I was ready to leave, to be honest. Right. I'd grown up in the show. I was 11 when I started, and I think nearly 17 when I left. So, and those 5 years are massive. That's a big change. And I'd very much grown up. But I was ready to move on and do other things. I felt like Chrissy, especially after the whole pregnancy storyline, I thought to stay would just be a bit stale. It would kind of be the odd episode where Chrissy would be there with the baby, and I just didn't feel that there was anywhere else for the character to go. So
Okay. So after Grange Hill, you did carry on acting?
I did.
Yeah. So I've just looked through. I'm going to say it, listeners. I'm sorry, because I always say this. I use IMDb for most of my research, which isn't the most. I know it's not the most accurate, the most reliable, but there was a couple of things there. So you were in a thing called To Play the King.
Yes, with Alex Walkinshaw.
Yeah, he was in that.
Was in that with me.
Yeah,
we did the episode together.
Yeah, and I think was it like a spin-off of House of Cards? I think.
Yes, it was.
So you played a mugger in that.
She was actually a prostitute.
Yeah, well,
I mean, my dad was so proud. I was typecast as a prostitute or a.
You're saying that. I watched the scene you were in. You're there coming on to the fella, but basically just so the other two could make his money. Basically, like it wasn't like
but
there
was the undertones that Alex was the pimp, and
and then you did a couple of Casualty, as well.
I was a prostitute in Casualty,
and I'm going to say you were in the bill
twice.
What did you play in the bill?
I was a single mum on the Jasmine Allen estate.
Right.
I had a lot of fun filming that, actually. And my eldest son played my child.
Right. Wow.
Because by that point, I had my first son. And they just said, oh, could we use your son? Because it would just be easier for casting and everything. And I was like, yeah. I think he was about 2 at the time.
Right. Because when I've looked at your episodes in the film, there was quite a gap between, like, I think your first and your last episode, probably about like 9 years or something. So were you always acting even though you weren't on telly?
Yes. So what did I do? I did 2 episodes of Casualty, 2 episodes of The Bill, The House of Cards, and I did a couple of commercials. I want to say BT Cellnet.
Right, yeah.
If anyone can remember those.
Yeah.
I did a commercial for them.
People will be looking for that on YouTube now. Now you said that, people will go, that'll turn up. That'll turn up on social media now.
I also did a Radio 1 film, like a short film that was going out in the cinemas.
Right.
There was a film. Was it called Velvet Underground?
Right.
And I think it was, well, as if I recall, it was to be a trailer before the film. And we filmed that in a really trendy club in Ladbroke Grove. Can't remember the name of it now. I can. Subterranea.
Right.
I think. Right. And I was just so awestruck that the DJ for this commercial was going to, not commercial, sorry, short film, was Judge, what was his name?
Judge Jules.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, this is epic. And Stephen Graham was in it.
All right, yeah.
Before he was obviously in the stratosphere that he is now. And I remember he turned up rather hungover and late, and they were very furious with him. And he was like, I'm minging.
Sounds like a scouser, that, like, yeah.
Yeah, he was, honestly, I was like, you're in so much trouble there. But yeah, we had great fun filming that. So yeah, there was things that maybe didn't hit the mainstream of that.
But working for Radio 1, Chrissy kind of got her ambition come true. Working for Radio 1.
I mean, she wasn't DJing, she was just partying hard. But yeah, she didn't quite make Ibiza, did she, with her DJing, bless her. But yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So when did you sort of, like, was there a point where you decided then to step away from acting?
Yes, I mean, I think it was a very conscious decision, really. I mean, my mum had always been like, get a proper job, get a real job. My dad was probably more supportive, but I had my eldest son, and I just thought, it's great when you're working, but when you're not. And I just, I had to be a grown up. And I need to buy my own place, and I need to provide stability for my son. So I kind of stumbled into nursing because my mum was a nurse. My older sister was a nurse, and that's what a real job is. So, so I kind of just sort of stumbled into that just because I needed stability and a regular income that was just going to be, more reliable. So that was why.
Yeah. Okay. And so is that what you're doing now then?
Nope. I left that about, in 2007. I got married to my husband in 2007. I'd had another child, and I thought, again, a lifetime in nursing is a lifetime of study, and I really wasn't enjoying it. And my father-in-law was a police officer. Right. And he said, join the job. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that. And then I thought I'd considered going to back to uni and studying law. And I thought, actually, it's not a bad idea because it's probably the next best thing. And so in 2008, I joined the police, and I'm still in the police now.
Brilliant. Wow. That's quite a change, that, isn't it? Like,
yes.
But do you ever get recognised?
So that went in spits and spurts. For a long time, people thought they went to school with me.
Right, yeah, that seems to be a common one.
Because you just associate, very rarely people would now. I mean, gosh, who really would recognise you? But I mean, it was very much known when I joined the police, and that was not fun because I think, I started out on a response team in uniform, but everybody knew. I don't quite know how, but once somebody knew, there was no keeping a secret. And I either turned up at jobs, and I think people thought that the acting hadn't gone very well, and I'd arrived as a strippogram. Not helped by the fact that people that I worked with would play the Grange Hill tune down the radio.
Right. Okay.
You'd arrive somewhere and it'd just go wah, wah, wah. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to escape this. And I don't ever escape it, to be honest. I try to keep it quiet, but it doesn't matter where you go. People find out. You just can't keep a secret. Well, not me. I mean, I'm never comfortable really talking about it. I don't know why. I just always think when somebody asks, you kind of think, oh, I don't want to answer that, because I always remember the Bridget Jones film. Who was the chap that, was the actor in the film? And they'd go, sorry, can I? And they go, yes, I was. And they go, no, sorry, you're on my coat.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just felt like it'd be that person. Like, don't be that person.
No, that's quite. Yeah, like I say, it's quite a common one for people to think you went to school here. But I was not expecting you to say that. People thought you were a stripper. That's just thrown me completely.
Well, you turn up in a police officer's outfit. I'll never forget my 20. Was it my 21st? Yeah, my 21st birthday. And this is where it stems from. A guy turned up. They got me a strippogram. Of course, I was horrified. But the chap that was the strippogram was dressed as a police officer. This is obviously years before I joined the police. Right. But he turned up as a police officer. Can you keep the music down? And then he pulled out some baby oil, which was just hideous. And the next thing, he started to strip. But he was in El Dorado.
Wow.
You can see why I would have this in my head. You turn up as a police officer and people assume you're a stripper.
Brilliant. So, because you've said there, like you've always sort of shied away from talking about Grange Hill and stuff like that. But are you still in touch with anyone from Grange Hill?
So I wasn't for a long time, and then Erkan got in touch with me. Very, very bizarre. One of my best friends at the time, her husband was at some social club near to where they lived, and Erkan and Lee McDonald were there. And he said, oh, my wife's best friends with Chrissy Mainwaring. And he went, are you joking? I've been trying to find her for years. And he was like, no, here's her number. So I randomly get a phone call from my friend's husband one Saturday night, because he's at his local club round the corner, and he goes, hey, I'm here with Roland. He wants to speak to you. So bizarre. And he was like, Sonya, I've been trying to find you for years. Like, you've got to come to a reunion. We're having a reunion. And I think I went along. I was pregnant with my third child. And I went to the big reunion in Leicester Square. Erkan had organised it. That's probably the only reunion I went to. And it was my husband that said to me, you have to go. This is amazing. And I was, probably just under 3 months pregnant, thinking, oh, I really don't want to go out tonight. But I went along and stayed in touch with Rebecca, who played Fran.
Yeah.
And we're still in touch today since then. And that's about 14 years now. Cool. So Erkan, definitely Erkan, and Rebecca, I'm still in touch with.
Brilliant. Okay. So, well, we are sort of coming towards the end of the interview now, Sonya. And I've got the same few questions that I always ask at the end of every interview. They are all Grange Hill related. So, over the last couple of years, there's been talk in the press of a Grange Hill movie in the works. Phil Redmond has written it. But what do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
I've heard rumours about it. People will always send me stuff and say, oh, are you doing this? Is this happening? I don't know. I would like to think that sometimes you should leave stuff where it is. Would it work? But then I think the nostalgia around Grange Hill is so massive for so many people. I mean, your podcast is testimony of that, isn't it? And there is a real interest for it out there. I mean, what would it be now? Would it be all of the cast as adults? I don't really know what the plot would be. But, you know, there was some good storylines. It tackled a lot of things, you know. I mean, God, when you look at culture today, you know, could it have a really good message for, you know, like knife crime and gang violence and stuff, you know, if it could make a difference and have a really positive impact, then I'm all for it. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And if you were asked, would we see a return of Chrissy Mainwaring?
I could come back as the schools officer, couldn't I?
Yeah. And maybe bring Jay along as well. Like,
oh well, I mean, Chrissy's probably be a grandmother as well by now, wouldn't she? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To be part of something that's obviously had such an impact and continues to be so popular in people's, you know, following, then I don't know. But I certainly haven't been asked. So,
right. Okay, all right. So you said right at the start that you'd been a massive fan of Grange Hill. So, other than Chrissy Mainwaring, who was your favourite character on the programme?
There were a few. There really were a few. I'd have kind of the favourite teacher's character, and for different reasons. I really liked John Pickard's character.
Yeah, Neil. Yeah,
he was just
Neil
he
Simpson.
was he was a villain. Like, you wouldn't. Yeah, I liked his character. I'm just trying to think who else. I think they all had such great characters. I mean, George Christopher, I remember watching him once, and it was over the Danny Kendall storyline, and he was so angry that John Alfred had to calm him down and remind him that they were just acting. He was actually going to start knocking people out, and he got really. He was a great character. I thought Trevor Cleaver. I mean, I loved a lot of their characters. Yeah. I really did. So yeah, that's it for me, I think.
Brilliant. And if you couldn't have played Chrissy, which other character would you like to have played?
Oh, interesting. Probably before I joined, I would have liked to have been Fleur Imelda's character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So the final question then, Sonya, is why do you think then there is still such affection for Grange Hill?
I think we all hanker back to our childhood with such fondness, you know, and I think it's that nostalgia as we get older. And there's, you know, my kids don't know Grange Hill. You know, I mean, they'll Google it from time to time, and they're just, but it has no impact. So it's our age group that have all of that nostalgia. Yeah. It comes with age, doesn't it, really? Sentiment and nostalgia. And I think people just look back on it as a wonderful time in your life when you were carefree, you went to school every day, you got to hang out with your mates, you didn't worry about bills or life in general. And I think that's why, really. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Sonya, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great speaking to you.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. My pleasure. So once again, thank you so much. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.